Hello, and welcome to Finding Common Ground podcast with Heather and Steve. And today we have Assembly member Marianne Buttenschon with us as well. She's coming to us from Central New York. And Steve, I'll let you do a little introduction since she's in your neck of the woods.
Yes. Hi, Marianne. I appreciate you being here today. I'm so impressed with the work that you do in our area with so many different parts of our population. The one we're here today for is the IDD population, and we would love to hear a little bit about your ombudsman program. So I guess the first question would probably be, what could you explain a little bit about what the ombudsman program would be doing?
So it's a bill. So thank you again for having me today. And clearly, as we look at the importance of ensuring that all New Yorkers are represented. I've had the opportunity to work with Steve. He is an individual that we're very appreciative of him taking his leadership when it comes to respite care. And I know that clearly your passion is one that is clearly something that I respect and I appreciate. Most recently, as you know, we had an event that was in the Utica area where Steve was a panelist with many other individuals in the community to talk about the importance of collectively bringing individuals together with developmental disabilities, as well as the importance of inclusiveness. So again, I appreciated that panel discussion to me, it was very informative. A little bit about me, my background is in higher education. I spent quite a few years, about 20 at Mohawk Valley Community College, where I completed my career as a dean of emergency services. So creating a police academy and a fire academy with an academic component was very important to me. So as I reflected, is the panel discussion, there was many officers that were there trying to understand the importance. So my component, I had two bills that were passed. One that talks about ensuring that all individuals are within the training that we see in public safety is inclusive to include everyone. Sometimes we forget diversity includes all individuals. And as the panel discussion had SPOs there, which are in our area, special police officers that are in all of our schools. So more importantly, I'll reflect back to the ombudsman's bill that was passed in both houses, and we're hoping the governor signs it. And it is an independent developmental disability ombudsman program, including establishing service delivery structures based in New York State that includes toll-free telephone hotlines, interactive websites, and the ability of in-person telephone emails across the ombudsman program. Often.
I was just going to say, I have to interrupt because some of our audience probably has never heard that word before. And I know before I went to long-term care and I was in healthcare, I would hear that word, but I never knew what it meant. Maybe we could start with just, who would an ombudsman be? Like, it's a person. Are they paid? Do they volunteer? How does somebody find an ombudsman too?
All of the above.
Okay.
So again, it could be one or the other, depending on the community and depending on the community's needs. It would have to be someone that is knowledgeable. Probably the most important thing is knowledgeable, patient, and willing to listen. So, but this is just a little bit more about what services are available and how best to make sure that folks that need those services. All too often, my office handles so many questions that come forward, and clearly where to go to get those answers. So I find that that's probably one of the most significant aspects, is how do we make sure that we provide knowledge to those individuals.
Right. When you're in those
I-
situations, sometimes you don't know what you're supposed to do, right? You know, like that, I feel like that's what a parent might not understand what their rights are. The individual living in a home or in a day program might not. So the ombudsman's a neutral party, but they're there to help the person with a disability understand what their rights are and what steps they can take to improve their situation. And that's such a nice thing for them to have. I mean, in long-term care, it was a game changer for a lot of residents to know that ombudsman was on their side. So I'm so appreciative of this work. This is so important.
Well, and it is. I have to say, you know, the ideas don't come from me. They come from folks that I work with, and that's clearly such an important strength. I'm very, very blessed in this area because I do have so many that can provide the insight and wisdom that is necessary.
Yeah, and then we need a leader to lead. So thank you. I think
that's good.
That's a really good introduction to the program. One component of this podcast that we're doing is like kind of demystifying politics and government and how families can engage with people like yourself, their assembly member or their senator, so that they can have an impact and build relationships.
I would have to say that sometimes we find, as you say, to approach us, it's the approach that you would do with anyone else. We're just looking for some facts. Sometimes we're just a sounding board, but the facts help us move legislation forward. It also is a professional matter of just kind of having that professionalism that comes with so many different aspects of life. There are some advocates that come to Albany that are aggressive, and I'm not really sure they know why they're there. And my colleagues and I have realized that that's not the approach that will work, but facts and professionalism do very well.
Right. You want to have a relationship. And that's something I think that Steve does really well. I'm working on those relationships too, because it isn't adversarial. You're there to represent us. And so if we have an idea or a concern, then you're sharing something. You're not demanding something. You're not forcefully, holding up the sign and protesting. Because Steve and I, and you can comment on this, Steve, but the rah, rah, rah in Albany, when everybody has the signs, it can be really emotional and energizing. But what happens after that? Now it's almost like the two parties, the two groups that should be talking are more separated.
Yes. And I'm not sure louder is better. I think more because it becomes numbing. So
what's the best way, would you say, for a family? Would they call your office, an email? I know when I email my legislator, I always get that generic email back because you guys get hundreds of emails a day. And then sometimes I hear something back, but maybe a phone call or even stopping in. I don't know what the protocol is. So I guess what's courteous?
Well, generally, just because you get the announcement immediately back doesn't mean that we're not looking at it. So it's a matter of, and I can only speak for my office. So primarily what we would do is just circle back and ask what you need. Is it a callback? Do you need a meeting? What would be best to provide that support for you? So we just kind of veer to how you like to contact people. We do take calls. I am in the state office building, so generally if someone comes in, there is a security desk. But everybody's office might be a little different. So you might just make that quick call and say, this is what I'm looking for. Let's figure out how best to get you what you need.
And Steve, how did you figure this out? Because you do it all the time.
Look, Marianne has been extremely accessible to me. I remember going way back multiple times, meeting her in her office, besides Albany, but also in her office locally, and she was always listening. I remember one time I came in, I don't know if you remember, Marianne, when I came in and I told you I was thinking about doing a 501c3 nonprofit, and you gave me wonderful advice. You told me don't be one of the many, many, many hundreds of the other ones that are out there. Go out and partner, go out and make something happen behind the scenes. And just like you said, come in with me with facts, and then I can help. And I've actually been using that approach for quite a while now, and it works.
I think that's important for our families to hear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do have to emphasize what Steve said is it's hard because when a nonprofit for some reason has been the buzzword, but more importantly is who else has your mission. So if you can partner with them, the administrative work in a nonprofit takes away from your mission. So if someone else is doing all the administrative work because they've already established and they're ready to roll, you just looking for resources and let them go do the paperwork and you reap so that your mission can be carried. But sometimes divisions happen, and my answer always is division provides weakness. So if you can stay together in strength, even though maybe you're not 100% in line with someone or what they're doing, you're definitely going to be much more successful, especially in Albany, because if you can imagine, generally we do meetings every 30 minutes.
Wow.
So if each individual's coming in every 30 minutes with a resource request or a request for legislation, it kind of bogs it down versus let's just try to determine who else you work well with, and maybe you don't work well with them, but still work with them because you're going to get to the same mission, which is so important, which you're doing. And those are the things that I just see. But I just had a girl yesterday, that came in and just like you, Steve, I'm going to get, and I'm working on it, and I've got $5,000 in the paperwork and attorneys. And I said, and how many hours? She said probably 200 hours trying to establish this nonprofit. And she wasn't able to do what she wanted to do, which was help individuals.
That's so true. You get caught up in the paperwork and then you forget about the people. That's such an easy rabbit hole to go down. I think for Steve and I as parents, and family members, we have to do the day-to-day, and that can feel so overwhelming for some families. I mean, we're facing a lot. The idea of the ombudsman is really special because even though I think some of the agencies and the state-operated facilities, they obviously got into that position. They have a mission. They're there for the right reasons. But like you said, the politics of it, the bureaucracy of it, the paperwork, all the red tape, sometimes the person gets lost in that. And then the family member can speak to the representatives, but speaking to the ombudsman, that person's separated from all that. They're not bogged down in the same systems and the same red tape. So they can really hear you. And being heard when you're in a crisis is very important. I'm working with one family out in my area towards Rochester that their son was really critically injured in a group home. I mean, he ended up on a ventilator. He was in the hospital for over a month. He had to relearn how to walk and talk, and no one has followed up with them. It happened in March, and this is the end of June that we're recording this episode, just to give you an idea. We have systems in place for people with disabilities, like the Justice Center. When something happens, we're supposed to have them investigate it. But having an ombudsman walking you through the process, I think that will be a big difference for people. I think they'll feel less alone, and they'll know when they should push and when they have to wait. Because there's some parts of an investigation that just take time. But we also know if you don't push at certain points, it could get dropped or get lost in the shuffle. And for some families, that's a very hard decision to make on their own, when to push and when to wait.
I would recommend that they reach out to their representative at the state level just to make sure they feel things are not going in an appropriate manner, though, because I don't want them to feel they're not being heard, as you said. That's not appropriate.
No. And Steve and I have talked about the whole idea of a justice center that for people who aren't aware, if you have an intellectual or developmental disability, an IDD in New York, and something happens when you're at a day hab or a group home, most of the time we don't call 911. The Justice Center gets involved, and they were created with the best intention. They understand this population, what the regulations are. They're looped in with all the people associated with OPWDD. But sometimes, a lot of times, there aren't credible witnesses. There's no camera footage. There's no way to verify what happened. And so what parents are left with, we're not sure. We can't really punish anybody. We're sorry it happened. And that's kind of it. And that's a hard pill to swallow for people in our position, right? Because if that happened at Wegmans, the grocery store, if we were on the public bus and somebody hurt us and we ended up in the hospital, a police report would be filed. We would have, probably a judge that we would talk to, and there would be maybe a jury, and we'd have this whole process that we understand. The Justice Center is this just separate system that doesn't always feel like it's working. And I just think the ombudsman is just another layer of protection, another way to guide people.
The housing thing, I get affected. We're longtime therapeutic foster parents. We do respite. We've done raise the age respite. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of beds across the state. It's not just in our area. But locally, we're affected because I personally know some of these children that are out there that are left. And I actually was talking to the senior vice president of WIN on Wednesday, and she was telling me some of the stories about there's no housing because some of these kids wind up in ER, and they're stuck there. And it really shouldn't be. And I'm hoping to, with Marianne's help and OPWDD and OMH and several of the other agencies, to try and find some answers locally for housing. I know we're trying to get creative with some of those things. It's complex, so it's not an easy fix, but I do think there's solutions to it. And I know we're trying to do some things through the Utica Center for Development for Housing right now. And I hope to sit down with Marianne with that going down the road.
So WIN is a hospital in our area. So for those folks that don't know, and it is, unfortunately, we have children that are dual diagnosed that are in the ED there, to Steve's point. So I do have, when you asked me earlier, what is your push for the future? I have a piece of legislation that talks about strategies for housing for our youth that have coexisting, whether it is a mental illness, whether it's a disability, whether it is any other issue that the state is trying to be a part of assisting an individual. So more importantly, when you have on my wish list, that's the piece of legislation. There also is supportive housing discussions that I'm having. Just waiting to see what type of resources are going to come out through RFPs. But it is a statewide issue. My goal, again, is always to represent the area in which I've been elected to, but not to neglect any others. We've had 2 roundtable discussions with all leadership of state agencies on the very topic that Steve just discussed. And those are done annually with follow-up calls. So trying to help individuals. It's kind of, as you had stated earlier, a little frustrating that you have to go to your assembly or senate to get an answer. But believe it or not, you're not alone. There's quite a few that call for that, whether it's utility issues or so many others that our office faces those challenges. But the first thing I usually do is apologize that they had to call me to get resolution. But,
right. But you're there, which is good.
So,
and I don't know if everybody knows that, when I'm thinking about it. And one thing that you touched on, Steve, that I think is incredibly important for our audience, and you, Marianne, nobody has just one thing, right? I'm short, and I have curly hair, and I have blue eyes, and I have ADHD, and I'm a psychologist, and I have 4 kids. We all are made up of all these pieces. None of us fit neatly in one bucket. So when we look at people with complex needs, as a psychologist, I would see somebody who had an intellectual delay, a mental health issue, and maybe a medical complexity. In New York right now, those are 3 separate buckets of funding, and they don't interact with each other. It's almost like you have to pick the one you can get the most from, and then the other 2 might not see you anymore. And that's not how things work. We're whole people. We can't be divided into parcels. So I really appreciate that you're seeing that issue. And with the housing, pulling in veterans, pulling in organizations that help the elderly, pulling in people who are going to bring in all these different kinds of people who need the same kind of housing, but also bringing in different buckets of funding. That's how we get things done. That's what community is. When we have everybody working together instead of isolated in these silos trying to each take care of their own mission, the mission should always be the community as a whole, I would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm doing in Rochester is a comprehensive housing analysis. And we're the first region in New York State to do it. First place is an organization out in Arizona, and they have worked with regions across the country. And they come in and they prepare a survey that's pretty similar to the ones they used in other regions, but personalized for New York State. So we went through this whole process of trying to figure out what's the culture of New York. How are we a little different than Utah and Nevada and Omaha and Arizona and all the other places that have done the study. And we personalize it, and then we start collecting data. And then the data that we pull is from the people in our region, and they analyze it. They also compare it to the national data. So we're part of this national initiative. But the really cool part is at the end, we get this final report, and we have a local leaders workshop. So people like you will be invited. We'll have people from OPW, Department of Health. We'll have housing developers at the table, investors, all working towards the same thing. How do we take the information we have now and create new options? Because I'm sure families are blowing up your phone. They're calling me, they're calling Steve because they're on wait lists, or the setting that they're in is inappropriate. Or maybe they're still living with mom and dad and the parents are in their 60s or 70s and they're saying, what will happen when I'm not here? So I think just knowing that when people hear this information, that you are a resource too, that you are one of the people that comes and sits at those roundtable discussions. You come to the local leaders workshops and you're willing to collaborate with other people. And in a time where our country is so divided, I just love that there are still situations where we can all sit at the same table and remember why we're all here. So thank you for the part that you do in that. I think it's very important.
Thank you. And I appreciate your time today and the invitation to share a little time with you today. And I look forward to future work that you're doing. And I'm sure I'll see either you in Utica or Albany or both, and, as well as via Zoom, email, you name it. So again, I thank you for this time today. I do have another meeting, so I'm going to take off from your podcast and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marianne.
4th of July.
So, Steve, what makes housing such an important topic for you? Why are you so passionate about cultivating new options for people in your area?
Well, because Heather, right now, what we have right now is not working. I'm the one that gets the calls from so many parents. They have no idea what to do with their children. That's why when we were talking with Marianne Buttenschon about the children being left in hospitals and stuff, if a child is 15, 16 years old and said they're going to hurt themselves and they're dropped off at the hospital, but the family doesn't know what to do with the child coming back and they're afraid, they will leave them. Or they've been
kicked out. Yeah, I was going to say, and sometimes they're getting kicked out of their apartment, right? If you have a child with high needs and they're making holes in the walls and they're screaming in the middle of the night, your neighbors are going to react. Even if you have a house, your neighbors could keep calling child protectives. And I think a lot of families get to a point where they can't miss any more work, that they don't know what to do. They feel unsafe. And then they out of desperation bring the child to the hospital, and they're there for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but there's no placements for them. So now they're stuck in an emergency room, or maybe they have a hospital bed, or they get transferred to a long-term care facility, but it's still a clinical setting. It's not a home setting. So, right. I mean, I don't know if you've had any situations personally with some of the kids that you're working with or families.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I'm in family court all the time because of the foster care that I do. Sometimes in family court, these kids are aging out. Sometimes there's nowhere for them to go. Sometimes when they go on a juvenile side, and they they're getting in trouble on the when they're in foster care, and they go on the juvenile side, and they go in through a whole another way in the courts. The problem with that is there's nowhere for these children to go. We've had 2 or 3 kids here in the last, I would say, year who could not come to my home because of bureaucracy, but they were put out there in a community and they failed. One particular kid who came to my home for 4 years straight on weekends. He was having a really rough time at home, really rough time in his schools. He came to my house and was great on the weekends. So it tells me a lot of its environment. But the answer is not to say because of funding or a regulation that he can't come to my house anymore. Because when he didn't come to my house, what happens is that child got arrested.
Oh, no.
And then he was put in a facility, ran away from there, and then got in trouble again, and now is aged out. And when he gets out of being in trouble again, he has nowhere to go. So that kid will probably go back to what he knows right now, which is living on the streets when it never had to happen. He could have easily been in my home. He could have easily been getting supports and services around him instead of nothing right now, which is what he's getting. So my point is, if we could find a place, one of these creative housing situations where we could put him in with some supports around him, we can turn that into a success story.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a group home. I think in a lot of people's minds, when they think about residential options, and you're talking about maybe people with delays or challenges, they automatically think you need to be in a group home. But we know with elder care, there's assisted living, there's different levels. First, you can get supports in your home, but if that's not possible, then maybe you need extra supports in a campus setting. And I mean, really, a group home or a nursing home is like the end of the road. You know, there's not a lot of options after that. So I agree with you. I have a young adult I worked with who was also raised by New York State. He was in foster care. Then he was over at one of our schools, Hillside, and he did that for a while. And then he started selling drugs. He got sent to prison, so he spent time in jail. And then when he got out, he had an accident related to his lifestyle, became a quadriplegic, okay? And then he got moved into a nursing home, and he lived there for 13 years. He literally is institutionalized at this point. He hasn't had enough family-based experiences like you're talking about. He hasn't had someone take him in and show him that he has coping skills and that somebody cares about him. And it's such a sad situation because he keeps trying to bust out of the location he's at now. I mean, the police are chasing him in his electric wheelchair down the street. And I say to him, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I don't know. I just can't stay here. I feel like I'm in prison again. And I can't imagine feeling like you don't have a place in the world, that nobody's thinking about you or worried about you. They just need you to put your head on that bed because that's how they pay. They get, they bill Medicaid and then they get paid. That's why they want them to go back, not because they care. Because when we care, we heal people. Maybe we need more therapeutic foster parents. I don't know. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very hard to keep foster parents in today's world. There's so many regulations and so much bureaucracy, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work taking care of a child. And most of the kids in foster care, they don't just come in with one delay. It could be a learning disability, a developmental delay. What we're finding more and more of, they're coming in with multiple issues, mental health issues, They could be slash autism slash mental health. And you have to decide, like you said when you were talking to Marianne, which lane do you go down? Do you go down the autism lane where you're going to get help with a specific agency, or are you going to go down somewhere else where you might get a little bit more help? But the bottom line is you're not getting all the help you need because you're in a certain lane and they're treating you as an autistic child, an autistic young adult, and you might have mental health issues. And it's extremely difficult to get families to hold on to foster kids for any length of time if they're punching holes in their walls.
Or they feel unsafe, right?
Damage.
I mean, if they're making you feel scared, I can appreciate that. But then I also wonder, how do we fix it? We have this whole generation of kids that are in this situation. And as the economy tightens and people are having a harder time paying their bills and stress levels are higher, that is when the parents drop the kid off at the emergency room and drive away. In my area, a doctor stood up at one of the OPW forums and said, we have a young man that's been sitting in our ED for 86 days. No one has even called to see what's going on with him. And that's sad. And I'm mad at the system, and I feel bad for the parents because that's not what they wanted to do. But at the same time, some people aren't equipped. They just aren't. And then we have to find a better place for them. So that idea of that housing community that you're talking about, if the veterans are coming back from their tours of duty and they want to give back to the community and we want to give them a hand up too, we want to give them a place to stay, they can look out for some of those kids. They can help them become more mature and they can model good things for them. If we move in some elderly people, they can impart their wisdom. They can look out for them. And sometimes you need a grandma or a grandpa in your life, right? You need a big brother. And for these people that haven't had that structure or those supports, these co-housing models where we're bringing in different kinds of populations and building a community that supports them, it's not just good for people with IDD. It's good for everyone there. They're sharing resources and space, but they're also, each person can be a leader in something. And I think that that's something we miss sometimes. We say we're serving this population. We're giving them something. Well, they have a lot to give. We have to figure out that give and take. And I think that's why these projects are so special when we're building communities instead of just building a house, because that's just a roof over your head.
Right. Look, the communities, things that you're talking about, almost every kid has come through my home. Only thing he ever wanted deep down, and he can go through 10 different psychologists and 15 different therapists. They want a sense of belonging that they haven't had. And when they don't get that sense of belonging, that's when they act out. And you'd ask me what we do. We have to do a lot of patience with these kids and undo all the damage that's been done. In a therapeutic house, it's not like it's an original CPS poll. In a therapeutic house, it's usually because the kid has been in multiple foster homes and been kicked out of all of them. But instead of addressing the behaviors and trying to figure out a way to come up with solutions to that, the answer, unfortunately, with a lot of foster homes is they just remove the kid.
They kick it down the road, kick the can down the road, right? It's
kick the can down the road. And then it's somebody else's issue and somebody else's problem. Well, think about the child. We've not done his best interest of him because now he's in another setting and more than likely is going to have more damage done to him because of that displacement.
Right. And the trauma of not having people looking out for you or consistency. And I think that's why in your community, people are turning to you because they know how many kids have come through your home and you know where those kids are. You're keeping track of them. That feels good. And I think that would inspire some of our listeners. Maybe if you want to learn more about therapeutic foster care or how you can give back to the system, maybe being a big brother or big sister of those kind of programs, I really hope this episode made you stop and think for a second, not just about ombudsmans and not just about housing, but how we each can help people one by one, mentoring, coaching, however you want to pitch in.
I think it's important that people understand that as much as the topics we've talked about today can be distressful, there are a lot of success stories out there. When we are able to undo the damage and where they've had nowhere else, and we get them a forever home, or we get them adopted, or they come back to my house because after college, or come back on their visits from leaves from the military, it's extremely rewarding, and you get a chance to see how those success stories truly are, and why it all ties in. The housing, the ombudsman, all this stuff ties in. If we don't help these children now, these are the kids that are going to need housing way down the road, and we better have some options for them.
Yeah, they're the ones that are going to be in trouble, right? Whether it's an addiction issue or a criminal issue or both. What we do up front always makes a difference going down the road. And I'm so glad that we could talk to Marianne today and hear more about the projects that you're doing. I'm really looking forward to some of our episodes coming up because we have a lot of topics to dive into. We really appreciate the audience weighing in. So if there's something happening in your backyard that you think we should know about, I really encourage you to come on our YouTube page or our Facebook page and let us know about it, because this is how we keep engaged with our audience. This is how we keep bringing you the things that you want to hear. So thanks for tuning in, and we can't wait to see you again.